And I'm going to take my customary drink of water here. All right. Welcome to politics. All right. Last week, we took a look at the last half of Book 2 in Plato's Republic, and this week we'll be looking at Book 3. All right, let's start with a recap, as we always do. Socrates' idea of justice stems from two different sources. Remember, this is the second half of Book 2 of Plato's Republic. Socrates' idea of justice stems from two different sources. First, that examining the origins of the city will give us an understanding of justice in a fully functioning city. Second, that this idea of justice in the city will inform us of what justice is in the individual. These are the two controlling principles in Plato's work. So let me restate them. If you learn nothing else by listening to all of these podcasts on Plato's Republic, then just remember these two things. First, that examining the origins of justice in the city will give us an understanding of justice in a fully functioning city. And second, that this idea of justice in the city will inform us of what justice is in the individual. So he's going from origins of the city to justice in the origins of the city, justice in the city, and then justice in the individual. He's chaining them like that. It might be backwards on your screen, but in the last podcast, we examined the first of these claims by looking at the origins of both the city and luxurious city, which in turn led to a discussion concerning the division of labor and eventually the good. With respect to the good, it was examined whether or not certain phrases should be represented as having done harm or not. To this end, certain stories were banned which contradicted this principle, and this is about where Book 2 leaves off. Today, then, we'll be looking at the third book of Plato's Republic, which deals with the governing class of society in general. The third book starts with practically the same material that the second book ended with, i.e. the censorship of certain stories and certain modes of storytelling which make men soft or afraid. This in turn leads to a conversation over the type of music to be accepted, which concludes that music which doesn't encourage warlike tendencies shouldn't be listened to. Plato is really diving into the weeds here. In this way, Socrates, well, I guess, he's writing this for Socrates. So, Plato or Socrates is really going into the weeds here. In this way, Socrates lays out a plan for educating the young, arguing that those who are brought up with these strictures will better be able to identify beauty and goodness, since they've been inculcated with them from youth. Incidentally, this idea of mastery requiring training from youth is also heavily emphasized by Plato's student Aristotle, who we saw in the philosophy portion, in the Nicomachean Ethics, which is also definitely a book we will be going over at some point. It's a pretty epic book. I've read the first chapter, so I don't know about the rest, but if it's anything like the first chapter, it should be pretty epic. On the basis of this idea of beauty and truth, then, Socrates argues that the pleasure of sex is immoderate and shouldn't be brought into a homosexual relationship between a man and his boy, or at least it shouldn't seem to come into that relationship. So I'm just kind of presenting what Plato himself says. I'm not really engaging in a full-on rebuttal. I'm trying to save that for after we finish this series. I might throw in a few comments here and there, but I just didn't want this to pass by without people thinking I agree with it, because I don't agree with that. Being actively in a homosexual relationship where you're having sex with the other person is wrong according to the Catholic Church, and it's just a no-go. And I think it'll actually come up again in book 5 or 6. So I'll do this critique though at the end of once we've considered all the books in Plato's Republic. All right. So in line with this moderation, the guardian class must be imbued with both gymnastic training and musical training in order not to become too hard or too soft. The conversation turns to medicine where Socrates says, when a carpenter is sick, he expects to swallow medicine from the doctor. Oh, I forgot to say the beginning of the quote. Beginning quote. When a carpenter is sick, he expects to swallow medicine from the doctor. But if anyone prescribes a long course of treatment for him, putting claws in his head and the things that go with them, he says without hesitation that he has no leisure to be sick and that it's not profitable to live that way. After that, he says goodbye to that sort of doctor, steps back into his accustomed routine, gets healthy, and lives doing the things that belong to him. But if his body isn't adequate to bear up, he's set free from troubles by dying. Uh, if the if they are to die, let them die, and decrease the surplus population, as Scrooge put it. So, notwithstanding the ethic of not harming enemies held by Socrates in the first book, which again was which I argued, well, I mean, it was a very uh, like charitable ethic for the time. This particular ethic is pretty brutish to people who are in need of it, in need of doctors. So, in developing this idea further, Socrates argues that judges are a necessary part of the government and that they have a corresponding role with doctors. And here's the beginning quote. Then you will establish by law in the city a medical art of the sort we were talking about, together with this sort of judicial art. They'll care for the bodies and souls of your citizens, those with good natures, that is, but for those who lack them, they'll allow all those so lacking in body to die off, and they themselves will put to death those who have an evil nature in soul and not curable. Thus, for the normal people, population control is practiced both through medicine and through law. Um, Pretty crazy stuff. Socrates now asks the question of which people should rule and answers it by saying that they should not only be those best adept at protecting the city, but those who most love the city. Therefore, the men who need to be selected from among the rest of the guardians. Oh, I forgot. Man, sorry, I keep forgetting to flag these quotes. Beginning quote. Therefore, the men who need to be selected from among the rest of the guardians are those who appear to us, when we examine the whole course of their lives, as if they most of all would do wholeheartedly whatever they regard as advantageous to the city, and who wouldn't be willing in any way to do what was not. End quote. Plato stresses that surveying potential future guardians is necessary to see whether they are actually willing to do whatever the city wants them or needs them to do. Okay, so this finally turns into a discussion of the city itself and how it would maintain order. Here, Socrates comes up with the famous noble lie. Um, and here's the beginning quote. Then could we come up with some contrivance from among the lies that come along in case of need, the ones we were talking about just now, some one noble lie to persuade at best even the rulers themselves, but if not, the rest of the city, end quote, which he then proceeds to tell in full. It's actually worth quoting this at some length, since this idea of the noble lie is what justifies all the actions that the state might undertake. This is it's not like technically a secular state, but this is essentially, you know, a secular state. And here, Plato has to introduce this lie to make it seem like it isn't simply a secular state, but is actually following following, following religious principles to appeal to the masses, basically. Um, and yeah, so it's actually worth quoting this in full because this is kind of it's a pretty bold claim, and it has a lot of implications in what Plato believes. Okay, so here's the beginning of the quote. In truth, they themselves were at the time under the soil inside the earth being molded and cultivated, and their weapons and other gear were being crafted, and when they were completely formed, the earth that was their mother made them spring up. So now, as if the land they dwell in were a mother and a nurse, it's up to them to deliberate over it, to defend it if anyone were to attack, and to take thought on behalf of the rest of the citizens as their earth-born siblings. All of you in the city are brothers, but the god, when he molded those of you who are competent to be rulers, mixed gold into them at their formation. But all the auxiliaries have silver in them, and there's iron and bronze in the farmers and other skilled workers. So, since you're all kin, for the most part you'll produce children like yourselves. But it's possible for a silver offspring sometimes to be born from a gold parent and a gold from a silver. So the god exhorts the rulers first and foremost to be good guardians of their children, of nothing more diligently than that, and to keep watch for nothing so diligently as for what they have intermixed in their souls. And if a child of theirs is born with bronze or iron mixed in it, they'll by no means give way to pity, but paying it the honor appropriate to its nature, they'll drive it out among the craftsmen or farmers, and if in turn any children are born from those parents with gold or silver mixed in them, they'll honor them and take them up, some to the guardian group, the others to the auxiliary, because there's an oracle foretelling that the city will be destroyed when an iron or bronze guardian has guardianship over it. And this is Plato's noble lie. Um, it's a pretty good lie, actually. I bet you could get some people to believe that on the Catholic right. Um, sorry. Excuse me. Um, Coming full circle, then, is there anything more to explain concerning the ways guardians should be brought up? Socrates argues that private property needs to be abolished for the guardians as well as anything that promotes greed. He advocates for military-like lodgings and moderateness in all other respects, that they may best defend the city they have been tasked to defend. All right, so in conclusion then, we started with a review of the last chapter, which showed us the origins of the city. And in this third chapter, we examined the education of guardians. Chapter 3 takes us right up where Chapter 2 left off, with a discussion over censorship and storytelling. Socrates then goes on to examine music and gymnastics as the best way to inculcate a love of beauty and truth. Socrates then goes on to advocate for a type of population control through the judiciary and medicine, where the judiciary gets rid of lower natures/criminals, while medicine lets the weak die off on their own. As an answer to which people should rule, Socrates proposes that it should be the men most dedicated to the service of the country, and he invents a noble lie to ensure that all of the things mentioned are carried out. Yeah, so this is a pretty heavy chapter here. Yeah, and going back to the jokes aside, going back to the Catholic right comment, yeah, I go to the traditional mass, Latin mass. I grew up in it, and obviously, I'm pro-life and all this other stuff. So I don't mean to like put them down, but I've just heard way too many stories of uh, people believing some odd things. So I hope you won't take that joke. I hope those in the Catholic right won't take that joke too amiss. Too amiss. All right. Well, we're actually moving pretty quickly through here. So I think that's about it for politics. I think for politics, I'm going to be trying to do. We've been doing one book approximately per episode, but it looks like that's ending up to be shorter than the full 20 minutes. So I think in the next coming episodes, we'll try to get two books into the coming episodes and see how